This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. And welcome into the Huskies Warming House Podcast, episode number 127 here in the den. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, and we've got another great episode coming for all of our listeners and viewers. And Nick, we are kind of getting down to the wire as far as teams that we believe are going to be atop the NCHC here, the top two on the way. And I think the secret is out as to who we picked to be number one, but we're going to start with the team that is number two, at least in our eyes. But again, we've talked about this top four quite a bit, Nick. And, there's, especially between the top two teams, there's not a lot of separation between the remaining two previews we have for the remaining top teams, I should say, in the NCHC. Did I say that enough times? Anyway, other things that we have to mention here. We're going to recap some more of the Women's World Championships. We're just getting down into the medal round now, into crunch time here. The U.S. doing very well. Knock on wood. We'll probably jinx that like we always do on this show. And then, of course, a very abbreviated Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup and Center Ice View News and Notes. So without further ado, the illustrious, the amazing Nick Maxon is going to take us away. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
I wasn't prepared for that. So here we go. With that being said, Noah, for those who are playing the home game, Noah usually makes the transition to Center Ice View News and Notes and this Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. I guess that's my duty today, and that probably was a Caleb Peabody troll just in itself.
I will say, not to interrupt you before you even get started on the show. Today is Thursday. Early. Today, yeah, I think I beat my previous record.
I think you did.
It's just before 7:30 at night here on Thursday, the first day of September. And I talked to Caleb today for the first time in a couple of weeks, and he was actually asking about you, and he hopes that you're doing really well, and he said that he misses you. So I don't want to be too sappy, but the man is looking out for you, and he's looking out for. He actually also asked if you were wearing your glasses today, and clearly you're not. So.
I haven't learned my lesson apparently. So,
yeah.
But
we'll find the appropriate nursing home for you eventually. I promise.
And sooner than later, apparently for me. So, speaking of sooner than later, the hockey season is coming up sooner than later. So that's actually some good news. It is September, Noah, which means training camps are a couple of weeks away, and also just a couple of things wrapping up in the news wise. How about this though? The Pens, sooner or later, needed to do something about Mike Sullivan. They did something. They extended him to another 3 years, which means his contract now runs to 2027. Two-time Stanley Cup champion. Also was a coach with Brett Larson of the Huskies at the Olympics. And so highly regarded there in Pittsburgh. And, kind of funny how he came into the fold and now is one of the more longer tenured coaches in the National Hockey League. And to me, Noah, definitely deservedly so.
Yeah, certainly. It's almost kind of interesting too, the Olympics and the big debate with when that comes out. Interesting that similar to what we see a lot with the World Juniors in the college world, which of course was affected this last round by the Olympics, but seeing NHL coaches and what used to be players kind of pulled away for that event too. So interesting timing for him, but I mean, that's an opportunity that as Brett Larson has alluded to, and I'm sure Mike has as well, that's an opportunity you don't turn down unless there's no other options. So well deserving of him. The Penguins are in kind of an interesting spot. They are just a team that they just never seem to really go away. You kind of think that this is the year that they're going to kind of fall off a cliff, or they're going to finally start to rebuild, and somehow they just keep on kicking. So kudos to Mike Sullivan. Obviously, a couple of cups really early on in his tenure with Pittsburgh, and since then, couple of lean years, so to speak. But he's been keeping the train rolling for sure.
That he has. Speaking of keeping the train rolling, how about out in Buffalo, keeping Tage Thompson rolling there up there in Buffalo?
Yeah.
7-year extension, $7.14 million per season. Holy cow. The 23-year-old had 38 goals, 30 assists for 78 points. And 68 points for those who can count, and 78 games played. I'm a little surprised by this, Noah.
Yeah,
the reason why I say this is the term and the dollar amount. This is nothing to take away from Tage Thompson, but it does kind of feel like a knee jerk with Buffalo that I think is sensing finally a little bit of actual hope to finally kind of make some progress toward being a playoff contender. And dare I say, maybe that influences trying to keep somebody that was partly a big time of their scoring last year in the fold. And we'll say if you're Tage Thompson, you're definitely liking your bank account now. But for Buffalo, this seems a bit knee jerk. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and the piece that obviously we came out with, and Jeff Skinner having a rebound year last year, and there was another player.
Yes.
There was another player that you looked at that contract too, and it was kind of like oof. With the emergence of Alex Tuck, obviously getting ready to do what he's been doing, kind of that top line really had a lot of success for the Sabres last season. So you can kind of see the building blocks of success. And the thing with contracts like this, we've talked about the Kirill Kaprizov situation. They signed him for, over $9 million. And you look at that and you say, boy, this is a big gamble. This could be something that, he could be well undervalued in his contract if he plays the way we think he is, or this could be an overpay. In Kirill's case, he's probably, the way he played last year, worth $11 to $11.5 million. I mean, he's just that good last season. Tage Thompson, only 1 year sample size where he really kind of broke free last year. So this could look really good if he's able to replicate a 35 to 40 goal season again. And then he looks like an absolute steal at this price point. If he has I don't even know if you call it a sophomore slump, but like a second breakout year slump for him, so to speak, it looks like a really tough look for the Sabres. But I'm sure when you look at that management group in the Pagulas, who really have had a real hit or miss relationship with that city in the past decade or so, they are probably chomping at the bit to finally get some offense back, especially with losing Jack Eichel. So
100%. Offense is part of the game, but so is goaltending. And the Dallas Stars re-upped Lakeville native Jake Ottinger to a 3-year deal, $12 million in total contract value, or AKA $4 million a season. Expected, Noah. I actually expected this number to be slightly higher.
Yeah, what a steal.
A big steal for Dallas, and for a goaltender that has been in the minors, has kind of played back and forth, and there's been some goaltending terrorism, shall we say, with Dallas for the past couple of seasons. Ben Bishop, just to name one of them, and then Braden Holtby, just to name a couple, and Jake Ottinger was supposed to be the future, and apparently future is now there for Dallas.
Yeah. And, he's a guy that obviously, had a great playoff run in the first round, getting to overtime in Game 7 against the Flames. But, to say his body of work has been, extensive is a bit far reaching. So a perfect little bridge deal here. It's kind of semi low risk, high reward for Dallas here if it doesn't pan out. A pretty good price point, I think, especially in today's market for a goaltender that all things considered seems to be trending in the right direction. So I like the contract. Unfortunately, I don't like the Dallas Stars, so that one might pay dividends for the Central Division rival of the Minnesota Wild.
That it may. Speaking of division rivals, this one not in the Central Division. How about more goaltending news? The San Jose Sharks moving Adin Hill to Vegas for a 4th-round pick. Last season, Adin Hill had 25 games to his credit, 2.66 goals against average, a shade over 906 save percentage, has 1 year left in his deal, $2.175 million. This makes sense for me, Noah, because they were about to start the season with Laurent Brossoit and Logan Thompson. There's some dare I say, a hole there. So Aiden Hill has been good. It definitely creates a little bit of competition. And I think more importantly, I think the move is more to try to take some pressure off Logan Thompson, who I got to see in person late last season, their last home game. I think he looks good, but I think they're definitely trying to make sure that they don't rush his development and more so put him in a position that he can't succeed.
Yeah, and it sounds like the Sharks are actually ready to take a real long, good look at Kaapo Kähkönen too, and give him the net and see how he's going to perform too. So, yeah, I wouldn't call it a nothing move, but a bit more of a low key movement here as we get ready for the season. But Vegas addressing some needs, and the Sharks desperately looking for a rebuild with a lot of retooling, both player wise and front office wise this past season.
And just the beginning of what is more shaping out to be looks like a long rebuild for the Sharks. Granted, they were a powerhouse playoff contender for the better part of the decade. And, no good deed goes unpunished. No. And I think for San Jose, maybe hopefully with the new regime finally seeing that it's time to maybe doing some rebuild. And it's tough. There are some good players there, but it might now be the time to do so. Speaking of rebuilding, the Wild aren't rebuilding their defense, but maybe retooling their defense. They did trade Dmitry Kulikov to the Anaheim Ducks for future considerations. His contract was worth about $2.25 million. So that sheds that cap space. Now, a side note for me, I know that there's been the Calen Addison discussion. I do feel like there is some room here, but then again, we talked about this again. He's a top 4 defenseman if he's going to be successful. You open up maybe something there. I'm not so sure. Here's the other thing. You were never going to get anything for Dmitry Kulikov. For those who are out there that are saying, hey, I can't believe there were essentially nothing burger in the return for the Wild. The Wild, and like we're out there to get anything in return for this. They were trying to offload a player and some money that they felt like they had extra on. And let's be fair, in Toronto sent Patrick Marleau and a first-round pick to Carolina just to offload his contract for him to be able to shed cap to a team that, for Dmitry Kulikov, what is it, his 4th straight year with a new team. He's bounced around a little bit. It's kind of sad because I think Kulikov actually had a decent regular season, but dare we say that this team was always going to be judged in the playoffs, and let's just say it lightly, his playoff performance was not great.
Well, and I think we're getting to that point where we're going to finally see if Calen Addison, who's going to be 23 by the end of the season, if he's going to really get a chance to shine here. You look at the depth chart, Jacob Middleton, Jared Spurgeon, Brodin, Dumba, Alex Goligoski, and then it's Calen Addison, your next defenseman that's in there. John Merrill right now is on the IR, and then Andre Suster is your healthy scratch right now. So beyond that, there really isn't anybody. The next one, maybe Dakota Mermis, that probably makes
maybe Brock Faber, depending on how the Gopher season goes late, but not starting option for sure.
And the other one that I didn't throw in here too, of course, Sam Steele getting signed. I was originally with the Anaheim Ducks and didn't really get tendered an offer here. So he's a good little depth piece that could make the team at a training camp on the forward side. I also always forget that Nicholas Patan is part of the Wild organization now too. Through 2024, he was a guy that was a really good World Junior player for Canada.
Very good World Junior player.
Couple of years ago, had a really big, bright upside. I believe he was drafted by the Jets and just kind of never really panned out there. So we'll have to see how that goes. But Calen Addison right now, when you look at the depth chart, it's hard to argue that he's not in the top 6, at least for right now. And even against John Merrill, depending on deployment, how you want to use him, it certainly makes the conversation at least intriguing. So the Wild are going to get a good look at him. It's kind of up to him to make it out of camp. We've talked about that for a couple of years where we said, Calen Addison, he just doesn't have a spot to make it out of camp, even if he plays well. Now I think is the first year where he really gets a shot. Don't you think?
I agree. We saw this different last year, right? Where we saw the depth signings of defensemen, including Kulikov and then including Jordy Ben, which was a late addition. And with a crowded NHL, essentially contract structure, we did not really see a, room for that unless it was really bad out of the fold. And, obviously hindsight's 2020, Noah, but imagine Kulikov didn't play as well with John Merrill the first little bit of the season. One would have thought maybe Kulikov would have been maybe a trade bait target come spring, and maybe that would have given Kalen Addison a bit more of a look in this, maybe end of last season. But again, not a whole lot of depth in the defensive corps like we saw last season with new additions. So the door seems to be open for him. But again, as Bill Guerin has said ad nauseum, this is not a given position. He will have to earn it. But it certainly feels like the numbers are in his favor this season as compared to last.
Yeah, and the other piece of this too, I mean, you look at the third pairing piece too. If Matt Dumba starts to struggle, it might be Matt Dumba and Alex Goligoski on that third pairing. I mean, you have no idea. So it'll be an interesting ride for sure. Excited for some Minnesota Wild hockey coming just around the corner this month. Actually, preseason starting on September 25th. So excited to get some hockey rocking and rolling here. Yeah. Speaking of hockey that is rolling right now, two more quick topics here. The U.S., we're going to talk about the Women's Worlds at the end of the show here. But one of the players, superstar Hillary Knight, made history just today on Thursday, surpassing Canadian icon Haley Wickenheiser for the most points in tournament history with 87. 33 years of age, first appeared at a world championship in 2006. She's been at the event 11 times since, 8 gold medals, 3 silvers, and leading the event in scoring on 4 separate tournament occasions. Also won 1 gold and 3 silvers with the U.S. on the Olympic stage as well, too. So congratulations to her. They thought she ended up getting it in the second period, but one of the assists was taken away. So her passing point was actually a goal in the third period, which you kind of like it when they're on goals. I feel like, for those moments, you like it to be something where they, pot one in the back of the net. So great hockey player. We'll touch on her, I'm sure, a little bit more in the extra ice session. Last topic here, Nick. I am so stoked for this. I shouldn't be because I don't really have any affiliation, but the Buffalo Sabres are bringing back the black and red third jersey to their uniform set. It's going to be a slight retweak here. The team will wear the third jersey modeled after those primary uniforms from 1996 until 2006 for 12 games during this year's season. The new uniform fully revealed in early November. The old Buffalo Sabres logo with the buffalo head and the red, white, black, and gray. Those are just sexy. I mean, there's no other way to describe it.
No, that isn't. And, we've talked about jersey flubs in the NHL before, and you kind of got the feeling with the test run of the reverse retros. Granted, it was a money grab. Let's be straight on that. But, was this also, sort of a test run for some franchises to maybe debut a more permanent third jersey? And you kind of wonder if other teams are looking at something like that as a nice little throwback. And dare I say it again, it helps everybody. And for Buffalo, again, one of the more iconic, old logos that have been around for quite some time. Again, for Caleb watching or listening to this, I was alive when they wore this quite extensively. This is the days of Dominic Hasek. This is the Dominators, uniform. And so, there's a lot of good karma associated with that design, and for Buffalo Sabre fans, a nice kick. Again, it's slightly retooled from the years past, but very, very good decision to bring those back. And those are going to be some games, I think, that will sell plenty of tickets and plenty of jersey replicas in their merchandise stores for sure.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was a big Thomas Vanek fan. So, of course, you had Thomas Vanek, Ryan Miller, Danny Briere, Jochen Hesch, Maxim Afinogenov, just so many great names coming back from those early to mid-2000s. And then, of course, their cup run in 99 that got halted by the Dallas Stars and a particular portion of the ice that happens to be right in front of the net. With that being said, Nick, we are going to head on over to the main portion of the show. And welcome into episode number 127. Myself, Noah Grant, alongside Nick Maxon. Nick, kind of getting back to normal a little bit, at least for this week. Hopefully, next week's show should be right on as a regular release, as far as we know. Excited here to get kind of to the tail end a little bit of some NCHC previews, and really, not in an offensive way to any other of these NCHC teams, but now we're getting into the powerhouse teams. These teams that had some really good seasons last year. Like you mentioned, hockey season is around the corner. You've got some things cooking here that hopefully we'll be able to reveal in a couple of episodes here. For myself, I am calling a hockey game by the time or the day that this show comes out on Friday. The Minotauros and the NAHL are already getting started. exhibition games this weekend, exhibition charity contest the following weekend, and then the NAHL showcase in Blaine at the Schwann Super Rink, and then the regular season starts. So it's pretty crazy how quickly everything has come together. Guys getting on the ice for the first time and getting some scrimmages and some practices in. So not only is the NCHC ramping up, like you mentioned, college hockey and junior hockey as a whole is getting ready, along with the pros in the National Hockey League. So, Nick, before we start with some college hockey news, we actually had a personal DM about the preview process a little bit and how we kind of run through this. And I thought this was kind of cool, actually, to, not that we like to toot our own horn a little bit, but it was kind of a general synopsis of like, not so much like sources, where do we find our information, but how long does it take to put some of this information together? What is the thought process for discussing where teams are ranked, that sort of thing? I think the honest testament, first of all, is that, each one of these, putting these together, because, I love my stats for sure. Each one of these, maybe 2 hours, 3, depending on how well a website or a particular team's personal website is laid out. Like, for example, the Denver Pioneers are a really good website to work with. They have a lot of great information and very well laid out. But yeah, I would say on average about 2 hours. So, obviously we put some work into this. And I think the hardest thing, Nick, and I'm sure you can attest to this, is not really so much putting all this information together, but trying to condense it in a way that's, palatable within 40 minutes to an hour, because I feel like each of these teams, we could talk ad nauseum for hours about each one of these teams.
You could, and it's there's so many things that are dynamic, right? So many things that are changing, from the roster to, points, and and I think, like you said, you can spend so much time and more so directed at what we've seen in the past. And the funny thing is, we're trying to use that information to predict the future, which, here's our crystal ball. Oh, wait, it's not there. But you're trying to make sense of, trends that you think are going to be there, or trends that it might be there this year that maybe weren't there last year. It's I don't want to say it's difficult, but you're in the if I was in the prediction world, thank goodness I'm not in Vegas and studying betting odds. I would not be very good at that. But like you said, it's worth a discussion nonetheless. And I think what's cool about this conference, and speaking of the NCHC, is, regardless of the teams that we've already covered early on in this preview series, or the ones that we're about to preview the next couple of weeks, is, there's a lot of things at this time of the year that are like, hey, if these pieces go right, hey, they could have a successful season. And you take anybody out of this conference and put them in any other conference, they're doing okay. So, I mean, it's one of those where, we have this prediction order. Yeah, we could talk ad nauseum, but at the end of the day, the teams and the players have got to fight it out for themselves. And we're just happy to be a part of their journey starting here in the 4 weeks.
Yeah. And going through, teams like Denver, like North Dakota, who obviously, if you haven't figured out, is going to be number 1 for us on this list. And I don't think there's much separation, maybe a point or two, between Denver and North Dakota this upcoming season. Both these freshman classes coming in are definitely going to make for an intriguing case. The biggest thing when we're taking a look at some of these teams too, and trying to balance that, past success and that sort of thing, who's going out, who's coming in, what do we know about the players already, what did they lose in terms of their dynamic. And the great thing about the NCHC is, like you mentioned, there's so many of these performers that have a chance to potentially pop out and be success stories in this league, and be success stories quickly. We did this preview last year, and it was more a chance for us to really kind of review and take a look at each of these teams. And we were so wrong in our previews because of how many things changed. And the fun thing is, yes, we do St. Cloud State hockey. That's primarily what we cover. And, it's fun to have our Huskies fans who, we mention who fans essentially wanted to know who was going to be picked first by us, number 1 in the previews. And it was actually 15-11 in favor of Denver. So we're going against the fans a little bit. And it wasn't,
I wonder why.
Yeah. And it wasn't a sleight of hand type of thing. Even though, and someone had humorously commented the Huskies as well, which is where I'm going with this. Even though we cover St. Cloud hockey, looking at this Denver roster from last season, looking at the points some of these guys put up, looking at some of the team stats, It's so exciting to look at it. It's so much fun. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you hate the Gophers. If the Gophers are the best team in the country and their goal differential is plus 90 next season, it's fun to watch. It's exciting to see how good some of these teams really can be. So, we enjoy it. We have a lot of fun. The hardest part actually about these previews, I think, Nick, before we jump into the actual one, I'm sure Pios fans are like, oh my God, get on with it. The hardest part about it is actually after we finish the previews and we go back to a show that has a little bit less structure, kind of forget how to say words, or in our case, we never really knew how. But what I can tell you, Nick, Magnus Arena was built and finished in 1999, capacity of 6,026 in Denver, Colorado. That is the home site of now the defending national champion Denver Pioneers from last season. They did finish first in the NCHC with 53 points. They won that tiebreaker technically-ish with North Dakota. They kind of split the Penrose basically. Finished fourth out of 59 with a 7.46 winning percentage in the pairwise. Actually finished behind Western Michigan, oddly enough. Overall record of 31-9-1 with a 7.68 winning percentage, and conference-wise a 7.50 winning percentage, 18-6 in the NCHC, including an unbelievable 17-1-1 record at home, almost unbeatable in their own building. Speaking of that barn from 1999, 10-7 on the road, 4-1 in neutral sites. We all know how those 4 games went. And over time, pretty successful in that regard as well, too. So 42 games overall for this team, 24 in the conference, 10 non-conference, an exhibition win against Lindenwood to start the season last year, 3 conference playoff games, and then some NCAA tournament that went pretty well. For David Carl and his staff, in his 6th season, his contract just got extended through 2027. Lifetime, he has 86, 43, and 3 with this team. Let's start with him before we get to the assistant coaches and goaltending coaches. Nick, you're a big fan of David Carl. You met him personally a couple of times. He's a straight shooter, very honest about where his team's at. Would you say, first of all, you think he's earned that contract?
If you don't think he does, you need to check your headspace. Seriously, he's a competitor through in and throughout, and he really took personal ownership of the way that the 2020-21 season went. He really felt like they missed some things in their preparation in terms of their team bonding, which affected their on-ice product. And it's funny how you have certain players or maybe it's personalities that will look at, kind of externally for reasons. David Carl's a guy that looks internally. And shall we say, when I see he's a gamer, let's go back to the NCHC playoffs. I got the impression after their first semifinal loss in that game, just looking at the way they played. Now, granted, their seat in the NCAA table was set. It wasn't really going to move. There was a bit of chess there. There was 100% some chess there. They played a very passive game. They didn't really try to run and gun an offense. They were avoiding a lot of physical contact and essentially were like, yeah, this is great, but we don't really care about this, shall I say. We care about what's next week. And let's just say they got maybe a couple of bounces early, but when a push came to shove and they went the distance there out in Boston, they were ready to play, and they were the best team in the country, lifting the national championship trophy over their heads. This David Carl, he's a great communicator. He's a great developer. He's a great teacher. He's a guy that he knows how to connect with young players. Again, he's not that old either for those, he's kind of fresh. And again, he's the perfect man for the job right now in Denver. And now with some national championship cred to his name, gets that extension. I know some people are like, well, will ever, would he essentially get NHL looks now? One national championship doesn't do that to you. Now, if you start making the Frozen Four year in and year out, maybe that contract, you don't live it out. But right now, David Carl is the man. And for Denver fans and for Denver players, no question, they're happy to have him as the big boss man.
2 Frozen Four appearances for him to his credit. He is 50% in the winning percentage, 500 in case we were curious on that one. Look at that math coming out of nowhere here. I don't know why. Maybe this is a very off-topic thing. I'm sure a lot of you have seen HBO's Band of Brothers. Every time I see his profile picture, he reminds me of the character, who ends up playing Dick Winters in Band of Brothers. I don't know why, probably because they both have red hair. I have no idea. But nonetheless, a great hockey coach too, as you alluded to. I don't really have anything to add on that regard as well. Assisting him, a very good crew as well too. Tavis McMillan in his 8th season. His photo on the Denver website, great photo of him. Looks like an 1800s portrait about inner conflict, like the way that he's just surveying things on the bench. It's one of those, like, you look at it and, like, I'm not saying it should be in an art gallery or anything, but you'll have to take a look at it if you get a chance. It's an interesting photo, I think, just very like a smoldering, intense look, but also looks kind of like dejected too. Must have been something going on. I'm not really sure, but a season for him. Dallas Ferguson, the other assistant coach in his 5th year, a great photo of him as well on the website, just snapping the puck around in practice. You'll love to see it. Then the goaltending volunteer coach, Ryan Massa, in his 2nd season, former University of Nebraska Omaha netminder up until 2015, and then spent 2 years in the ECHL with the Orlando Solar Bears. So in pretty good hands there in Denver, quite obviously. Last season, it's no secret they had a lot of wins against a lot of teams, Nick. The team they beat the most, the Miami Redhawks, with 6 total victories. St. Cloud was bested 4 times, swept by this Pioneers team, as was Colorado College and Arizona State, even though they're non-conference. Duluth beaten 3 times, but also was the only team to beat Denver 3 times last season.
And the only team, I think, that won in Magnus Arena, if I recall.
Yeah, so pretty interesting, little matchup for them in all 6 games between the Bulldogs and the Pios. Going back over Western Michigan and Omaha, they each were bested by Denver 3 times. Air Force was beaten twice. Minnesota State lost once to them.
Yikes.
Yeah. Michigan, also 1 loss. UMass Lowell, Alaska Fairbanks, and Lindenwood were the other victories for Denver. On the other side, as we already mentioned, the Bulldogs, North Dakota beating this team twice.
Western Michigan early on, wasn't it? That was early in the season, yes.
Yeah, and I believe they only met for 1 matchup, as far as I can tell. So North Dakota winning that matchup. Western Michigan beating them 1 time. Omaha actually beat them once as well. And then Providence and Boston College, each with a single victory. I totally forgot about that. They went out for that holiday tournament, and they lost that first game, like a 6-5 game to Providence, and then just got shelled by BC in the next night in terms of the scoreboard. Only 1 tie for them last season, and it was a true tie, no shootout for them. Alaska Fairbanks is who they tied with in a 4-4 hockey game, but they did outshoot the Nanooks by a tally of 47-21 in that contest. So Nanooks hanging on for dear life in that one. Nick, I'm going to start with this stat here. 2 of them, I guess. When outshooting their opponent, they were 29-5-1 last season.
Average.
When they were outshot by opponent, they were 2-3. So they were only outshot 5 times and tied with a team on shots once. So 6 total there for those who are doing some basic math. Can you name any of the 5 opponents that outshot the Pios last season?
Had to have been North Dakota.
North Dakota is 2 of them, 1 outshot and 1 tie. So the North Dakota one was the second time they were outshot last season, November 6th. 28-22 is the margin of 4-1 loss for the Pios. And then the one
Western Michigan.
Let's see here. No, Western Michigan isn't one. I'll give you a chance. One more. See if you can get one more here.
Minnesota State.
Minnesota State is correct. Yes, the national championship game, 28-20 was the margin for the Mavericks, but they did lose by a score of 5-1 to Denver. North Dakota tied them the night before they outshot them, 23-23, and that was a 3-1 loss for Denver. Boston College, that game where they lost 5-1, they were outshot by 1. 28-27, and then actually Arizona State, December 3rd, a 6-2 win for Denver, but they were outshot 33-29. And then Duluth in the NCHC Frozen Faceoff was the other one. They were outshot by 1 in that 2-0 loss. So this team was not playing from behind, both in the scoreboard and in terms of shot margins as well too. In fact, shots by period differential is plus 169. Pretty impressive for them. Goal scoring differential plus 82 last season, plus 46 in period number 2 for this team. They were just ridiculously good. They averaged exactly 2 goals more for per game overall, and just under that in the conference. I mean, they were just dominant, lights out. 21-1-1 when scoring first, and 10-8 even when they got scored on first. So, Nick, this is a team that was 5-2 in 1 goal games. So you could tell the margins were pretty big in a lot of their contests too. And they were winning a lot of these games. And somehow they were still a sleeper team last year when it came towards the end of the season. Why do you think that was when we saw the body of success that they had, obviously in the NCHC, but also just statistically? I mean, these are some great numbers.
I think the biggest question mark was, essentially could their offense, which, in playoff type scenarios with how good they have been, generally takes a step back. The games generally get tighter. They get more low scoring. They get more defensive heavy, especially, the one-off games. And dare we say Denver, one thing we forgot about them was, they usually outscored, folks by multiple margins, but they also were okay in those close games. And I think the expectation was that these were unsustainable numbers for a playoff run. But we've also forgot that they had a guy by the name of Magnus Corona in net who, dare I say, he's pretty good. And the defensive core, I think, was underrated too. I really do think that just their open style of play, and I don't know if open's the best way to describe it, but just more skating heavy, I guess not more like your Minnesota State. I think they got a lot of the attention for kind of their lockdown style. I think there were people I thought maybe if these guys matched up that would rank trouble for them. And to be fair, for 45, 50 minutes of the national championship game, they were until they figured out a way to break through. And I think that's where they were kind of maybe I don't know if doubted is the word, but not given maybe, enough of a chance. But as we've seen with teams in the NCHC past, was it 5 out of last 6 or 4 last 5 are national champions coming from this conference? You're built to win the big games, and Denver proved a lot of people wrong.
Yeah. So, Nick, I just lied to all of our listeners and viewers. I was looking at that shots by, well, I was looking at the shots by period, and I was like, boy, that just seems a little bit low. I lied. It was not plus 169. Nick, the shot differential for this Pios team was actually plus 528.
Jesus.
Yeah, they averaged, and I'll say it again, they averaged plus 12.4 shots more per game, overall, and plus 13.08 more shots per game in the conference. 13 more shots more per night in the conference.
Jeez.
36.9 shots per game compared to just over 24 for their opponents. I mean, just like that's insane. That's just dominance at its best here. When leading after 1, they didn't lose a game. When leading after 2, they only lost 1. Tied games, they were pretty dominant as well. Trailing, they were 7-6 when they were trailing after period number 1, and 3-7 after period number 2. So took almost 3 penalties a minutes less than their opponents last season too. Power play was all right, 49 tucks for them last year, just under 24%. Pretty decent little clip for that team. Only 79% of the penalty kill, though. They did allow 34 power play goals on 163 kills. So not terrible, but not exceptional. But then again, they really didn't have to rely on that, and they really weren't shorthanded a ton last season. So, Nick, when you look at teams like this, and of course St. Cloud went through this a couple of years ago, what do you think David Carl got this group ready for as they approached, obviously, the Frozen Face-Off and then into tournament time, to not only being a well-oiled machine, but, capitalizing not even so much on special teams, but just being this suffocating team at 5-on-5. Because as you alluded to, especially in the pod a couple of years ago, they just could never really get over the hump. They finished in 5th place in the NCHC. We looked at them and said, they're a dark horse, but I don't really know if all the pieces are going to come together. And the machine was just incredible last season.
It was. And I think the biggest thing is patience, honestly, if you look at it. And again, I refer to the national championship game. They were, essentially suffocated for the better part of that game. Minnesota State had them where they wanted to. And if there's one thing that I think David Carl does so well is, now he's constantly talking to his players on the bench and just more like sticking with the game plan, right? Not forcing things, not getting out of your structure, and just, staying the course, I think. And especially in playoff games and one-off games, such as the NCAA tournament, you have to be able to stick to your guns. And that's where the emotional checks and balances have to be there, right? Good coaches know how to get their players to, whether you're up 5-1, to just be like, hey, guys, there's 10 minutes left. This game ain't over with. Just keep fighting, keep doing what you're doing. Or in the opposite, hey, there's still 10 minutes left, guys. Keep pushing. Let's keep doing the same things. We'll get a break. Don't worry about it, right? And we saw that. I think that's really what drove the difference between Denver was you never saw them really get too high. You never really saw them get too low. And they did the same thing night in, night out, and they executed it at a high level. And a big reason why I think they turned the tides and, again, are national champions from this last season.
Yeah, certainly agree. 26 players dotting their roster last season, a graduate along with 4 seniors, 5 juniors, 7 sophomores, and 9 freshmen for that crew. We're going to start with just the forwards here because there is a lot to dissect with this forward group and the top 5 forwards here. Some guy that you actually have met personally, junior Bobby Brink last season, played in every contest, had 43 apples and 57 total points, a 1.39 points per game clip, 5 power play tucks to go along with a plus 27 rating last season for him. Not too shabby. Carter Savoy, sophomore last season, 39 games played for him, had 45 points, 23 goals, 22 assists, a very well-rounded, very balanced offensive threat, 1.15 points per game, 11 power play goals, the most on the team, and a plus 21 rating. Cole Gutman, who was a senior last season, every contest for him had the same number of points with 45. 4 power play goals and a plus 20 rating. Brett Stapley was also in that senior class. 43 points per him, similar points per game pace, same number of power play goals with 4 and a plus 22 rating. And then Carter Mazer, who of course just finished his campaign at the World Juniors a couple of weeks ago. Looking at him, 41 games played, a 0.93 points per game clip, 5 power play points, and a plus 23 rating for 38 points for him on the season. And I would be remiss if I also didn't mention that graduate forward Cameron Wright also had 9 power play goals last season as well on the forward side. Nick, this is a group where a lot of these guys are now gone, unfortunately, for this Denver club, but it's pretty easy to see why. They were just too good, too cool for school, man.
Well, a lot of them also NHL draft picks. You mentioned Bobby Brink signing his pro deal with the Philadelphia Flyers. Carter Savoy, I believe, was it Calgary? Edmonton? Yep, that's right. Thanks
You're
for the
jumping
reminder.
the gun here.
I know. And I don't know, Alberta, how do I do it, right?
But how could you not want to? I mean, these guys, exceptional season.
Exceptional season. So, and then actually just recently, Brett Stapley signing with the Montreal farm team down there in Laval. Yes. So that's some new news. Yeah. So. What?
Just gonna steal all my stuff over here. You want to run the show now? No, I'm just kidding.
Hand over the keys. Let's go. No, I'm kidding.
Our top story tonight: the bus has crashed. Anyway,
it's crashed and fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
But when you have that talent, right, and you get to the ultimate goal, right, the natural thing is what's the next challenge? And for these players, right, a lot of them upperclassmen, some we're going to be moving on regardless, right? It shows you just the level and the depth of talent that they had. That there was, and that's what bounds to happen to these teams is you're going to have turnover. And the bigger question for Denver as a franchise is how do you replace it? And more so, how do you keep the train rolling in terms of, players coming in? And I'm assuming we're going to talk about this, but their incoming class, whether it's freshmen or dare I say some transfers or some, they've got some good people coming in that's going to keep them in. A big reason why we have them up as high as we do.
Yeah, sure do. Mike Benning, who was a sophomore last season, all 41 games for him, 38 points, a 0.93 points per game clip on the back end, plus 32 rating to go along with 4 power play goals too. What an exceptional season for him last year. And then Sean Behrens, who was a freshman last year, really good. 37 good. Points or games played, 29 points in those 37 games. Really trailing behind Nick in this points per game category, though, with a 0.78 points per game clip. He needs to really figure it out there. I don't know what that's all about. Come on, man. No, that's pretty exceptional. I mean, that point per game clip is exceeding most of the defensive core and even some of the forward cores for some of the other NCHC teams we've covered. That's how good the Pios were last season. +9 for him in the plus minus. Goaltending wise, Magnus Corona was a junior last year. Played in 37 contests, 28, 8-1, a 2.11 goals against, and a 9.11 save percentage in just under 2,200 minutes for him. Defenseman, I want to hear your take on, quite obviously, but Magnus Corona has been a curious case in the NCHC ever since he started playing for Denver. And the knock on him last year a little bit maybe was, had a really good team in front of him. But the knock on him is that he hasn't really found that extra gear yet. He didn't really need it last year, which, thankfully for Denver, is he a guy that you think is a bit underrated and doesn't get enough love? I mean, what is your opinion on him?
Well, you still have to be able to stop the puck, right? And especially in playoff games, you're trying to find the chink in the armor, right? And I think for opposing teams, we saw that with Corona. There were times in the national championship game and throughout the NCAA tournament, you didn't have to do it often, but you need your goaltender to come up with that key save and key moments, and he did that. I'm not sure if he's underrated or overrated, Noah, but I do think you are correct that I do think he does benefit from a really good system in front of him. You talked about defenseman Sean Barons, a Colorado Avalanche draft pick, I believe a second rounder, if I recall. And let's just say this, he was at, I believe, their rookie or prospect camp not that long ago, and was really turning some heads. And you mentioned his point total. That might give you an impression as to why. So I do think there's a little bit of both. I think Corona is a good goaltender. I don't know if he steals the show or it's going to be a focal point, like say a Caden and Berko down there in Colorado College. But you know what, like you said, he doesn't have to be. And I think that's important for Denver fans to understand is he's a capable goaltender. He's already won you one national championship. And, let's compare this to a guy not that far. Well, how about Darcy Kemper? He was nothing special. He's won a Stanley Cup. So a lot of the times you can have that balance where you can make the key saves you need to, but you don't have to maybe steal a game here and there. You got a good formula in for Magnus Corona. He's good enough. And again, he made the saves when he needed to.
Certainly did, and now is a national champion. As is forward Bobby Brink, of course, as you mentioned, signed with Philadelphia. Chuck Fletcher, don't mess it up, or just tell us how you're going to do it. Carter Savoy, great season for him last year with the Edmonton franchise in Bakersfield right now. Defenseman Reed Irwin is transferring to Colgate. He'll be a junior. Forward Jack Works, who will be a sophomore, over to Michigan Tech. Two incoming freshmen that were supposed to come in have moved. Samu Salaman is going to Connecticut. He's actually a third rounder of the Devils back from 2021. And then defenseman Seth Bernard Docker, sophomore, is headed to Bentley. He is not coming to Denver, I believe, related to
Jacob.
Jacob. I was blanking on his first name. Thank you. Former University of North Dakota product. Graduating players. Cameron Wright was a graduate player last year. He actually signed with Colorado. He's with the Eagles right now. Cole Gutman signed with Chicago Blackhawks. Brett Stapey, like you mentioned, with Laval and the Montreal organization. Ryan Barrow, who was a senior forward last year with the Manchester Storm and the Elite Ice Hockey League in the UK. So pretty exciting for him. The only returning players staying for their graduate year out of that senior class is defenseman Kyle Mayhew, who had a season and career high of 2 goals, 9 assists, and 11 points last year from the back end. And then the incoming transfers, Nick, forward Casey Dornbach, who's a graduate from Harvard, goaltender Tristan Brose, who's going to be a sophomore. He's coming from the University of Minnesota. And then Tyler Haskins, who's going to be a freshman who was included in our freshman class. He comes from Michigan, so he ended up doing the reverse of what those other 2 players did for the Pios coming in this season here, Nick. So you look at adding a goaltender like Tristan Brose, who of course has the experience.
He's not a goaltender; he's a forward.
Oh, I don't know why I wrote. Yeah.
So I say that for a couple of reasons why. I saw he skated at the Beauty League. He was there quite often. And I think for Gophers fans, it stung. He did already have his Denver gear that he was wearing there during the Beauty League. And let's just say this. Apparently the Bros, if your last name is Bros, you want to stay away from either Bob Mott School or the University of Minnesota, because wasn't it his brother that decommitted and is now going to Wisconsin? And a lot of upside with Tristan. I think he kind of felt like he was not being utilized enough with the Gophers. Don't get me wrong. I don't get the same feeling that he will be used the same way here with David Carl and the Denver Pioneers. I think he's going to be a potential breakout for Denver, trying to replace again some of that offense they lost here in this offseason.
Yeah, certainly should. And again, we talked about the Magnus Corona piece too, obviously paying attention to that goaltending wherever it may come from, right? 2 graduate players, 4 seniors, 4 juniors, 9 sophomores, and 7 freshmen for another crew of 26 this season. 15 forwards, 8 guys on the back end, and 3 netminders. 5 of those forwards are freshmen and 2 defensemen are freshmen for a crew of 7 coming in for this upcoming squad here, Nick. Some good hockey players. Why don't we start with the defenseman, shall we?
Sure.
Lucas Olmsted's coming from Stockholm, Sweden, 6'1", 190-pound, left-handed, 2002, 22 points in 60 contests, and a couple more tallies with Dubuque and the Fighting Saints in the USHL last season for him. And then Kent Anderson coming from Calgary, Alberta. He's a 2003, but is 6'3", 205 pounds. Yeah, right-handed back end. stalwart, 62 games with the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL last year, 28 points for him. Was a very non-penalized player and was also on the USHL all-rookie second team last season. So two defensemen coming in to kind of round out that defensive core here. Certainly some pretty good additions, I would say.
Yeah, and it fits the mold, I think, what Denver is looking for. A little bit more that stayed home, good two-way players, nothing like a Kale McCarr-esque, but guys like almost like a Jonas Berdin, where you can move the puck, you got good skating, you play your angles well, you can have a big body presence if needed. We haven't touched on this guy because he's not a freshman, but a sophomore that's coming back that I think helps make this a little bit better. How about Shai Buinum, 6'3" sophomore at San Diego? Man, did he turn heads last season as a freshman. You talk about the transition a lot, right, from between juniors or a different college, and how just, a defenseman can, be such an impact player. Shai Buinum, to me, was one of those guys, a really big bright spot. And what that will do to this Denver roster, again, only two freshman defensemen, is they'll take some pressure off of them. I like the sizing, and David Carl liking his size in the back end. They were really tough to get to the interior, especially in front of their crease. With the Pioneers, they really protected their goaltender well. A big reason, again, why we say Magus Kroma didn't have to be a Marc-Andre Fleury sometimes to overplay the puck. I say that a lot. Yes, I did. Sorry. But again, it fits the mold. And this is exactly the type of player that David Carl and his staff are looking for as far as defensemen are concerned. Yeah,
it certainly is. And not exactly the flashiest of numbers, but sometimes you're looking for that. You're looking for a couple of guys that are utilitarian that you can slot in. Maybe you pair them with different defensive pairings and give them some shelter minutes, or maybe put them with a veteran player on the back end and let them acclimate that sort of way too. So a lot of good things and a lot of success for the back end for the Pios coming into their freshman group of two. On the forward side, well, let's talk about Tyler Haskins, of course, because he's coming from Michigan and that little, whatever you want to call it. Rochester, Minnesota native, 6'1", 170-pound left-handed, 2003. A couple of younger guys in this group here. 45 points, 20 goals, 25 assists in 52 games with Madison in the USHL last season. Had 7 points in 12 playoff games as well. Third on the team with 20 goals and participated in the BioSteel All-American game this past season. So I'd say a pretty good little get back for the Pioneers there to start.
Yeah, very much so. The Rochester, Minnesota native, right? I think that the big thing, again, when we watch guys at the junior level and they have that success, right? The other thing that you kind of like to see is just some of this other, dare we say, experience, right? The BioSteel All-American game, granted, it's sort of a showcase, but they're not just inviting everybody. Again, BioSteel, very big supporter of the game of hockey, especially north of the border where they're based in Toronto. But again, 27 points in 51 contest, again, with Sioux Falls a couple of years ago. So progression was there. What I'm kind of curious about is, what does that progression now look like for him as he gets into a system that I think is going to really benefit him, especially as a big forward. Again, as you mentioned, he's a bigger body. And I think with Denver's makeup, I think he will make a kind of more seamless transition. And as you mentioned, I think he's going into a spot with him. We don't talk about the culture enough with Denver, but it's a championship culture. It doesn't matter which player throw into that, they're going to benefit from that as well.
Certainly agree. Let's talk about kind of pair these last couple in terms of size. We got two of the smaller forwards here and two of the taller forwards here. So Tristan, I think it's Lemire, maybe it's Lemire. I think it's Lemire from Mirabel, Quebec, 5'9", 170, right-handed, 2001 shot, getting ready for his age-out season. Essentially, he has to come to the college game. And production-wise, he certainly earned that opportunity. 87 points in 107 career contests with Dubuque in the USHL. Had 50 points in 57 contests last season with the Fighting Saints. And then on the other side of that, the 5'11", 170-pound left-handed 2002, Aiden Thompson from Fort Collins, Colorado. 2 seasons with the Lincoln Stars in the USHL for him. Almost a point per game player, 116 tallies in 117 career games. Is pretty much a playmaker setup guy, 82 assists for him over that time. Alternate captain last season, 82 points and 57 outings last year, 58 assists last season. Second team, the USHL All-Star team honors, is a 90th overall round 3 selection by Chicago in the previous draft this past summer. So a couple of smaller water bugs, but Nick, as we've been able to see, these guys that maybe can't ride the Ferris wheel can certainly play some hockey.
So Lemire, as we think we might be butchering that, he looks to be a sort of the replacement for Carter Savoy. A shoot first guy, getting 42 goals. My goodness. And if I recall correctly, Savoy wasn't that big of a guy either.
And are you about to tell me that Aiden Thompson is the replacement for a guy named, another playmaker that might be?
It might be. Yeah. So, but again, a good mix, right? So you need a guy that can shoot. You need a guy that can feed him the puck and create space and, maybe draw some attention with possession. And, again, you try to create some confusion in the defensive zone. And again, the big asking piece of all of this with freshmen is, what does that transition look like? Again, when you're playing in the top leagues, such as the USHL, that it seems like as we go through this year and year, Noah, that these transitions are getting a bit smoother for some of these kids. And you have to, again, credit a lot of it to USA Hockey, a lot of it to the USHL for getting these kids ready to go, because overall, it's really going to help the game. I think it really has already. We've seen that with the USA National Development Program and the recent first round picks that they've had, almost kind of sliding the hand of Canada a little bit.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, these two players, definitely good. Like you said, water bugs. They're going to be buzzsaws. They're going to be creating some havoc. And, you don't have to be big, but you do have to be sometimes creative and have a good IQ and a view of the ice. And from what we can see with some of these guys' most recent accomplishments, I think they're going to be just fine.
Certainly agree. Two more players left in the freshman class, both forwards, obviously. The only other USHL product coming from the Omaha Lancers, 34 points in 59 games and a couple of points in 4 postseason contests with the team last year. Third in scoring and rookie of the year for the Lancers as well. Also was in that All-American game. That is Jared Wright from Burnsville, Minnesota, 6'2", 176. The 2002 was a right-handed shot, and also round 6 selection of the Los Angeles Kings in this past draft at number 169. So a guy that's more of a grittier presence, kind of a bigger body, power forward type build. You kind of need that on the front end too. I know that the Pioneers have largely been built a little bit more around probably a closer mix to speed and skill as opposed to big bodies. But as we've seen, especially when it comes national tournament time, you need a couple of trees in front of the net that are able to, get those grease pan garbage goals.
There's two players that come to mind that I think really were underappreciated with Denver's latest, and that was Cole Gutman and Brett Stapley. Not just because, they could not only just be the trees, but their forechecking pressure. They were always on pucks. They could match a little bit of that sandpaper with their skill in terms of, at least slowing down or at least giving the opposing defenseman a little bit of a hard time breaking out. They could create turnovers. And then when they got the puck on their stick, after they created that turnover, they had the skill and the hockey IQ to make something of it, of an offensive chance. This kind of screams similar to me in terms of this guy's makeup, where you have a little bit of that style where you can go in, you can be a heavy body, but more so just create hell in the forecheck. That's David Carl's style, as if I'm going to dump the puck and I'm going to make sure that I have a chance to get a first touch on it. And if I don't, I'm going to make the defenseman's life a living, try to get out of their zone. So this makeup of this player reminds me of those two players, which I think were really big keys to the big long run of their championship last year.
You know who another person that I thought was underrated that kind of reminds me of this similar build too, 21 points for him last season. That was Ryan Barrow.
Yes.
And looking at him, 6'2", 185. Obviously was an integral part of that national championship game. But he's another player that I kind of look at him too and kind of see that similar mold as well too. So exciting times here for the Pioneers and exciting times for the state of Minnesota as the last player we're going to have our eyes on for sure. Riga Lorenz, the Calgary, Alberta, 6'2", 190-pound left-handed, 2004, very young player that is getting ready to come in.
True freshman.
Yeah. Why are we talking about Minnesota when we're talking about the team out in Colorado? Well, Minnesota Wild, round 2, number 56 in this past summer's draft. He is a Minnesota Wild product here and had some pretty good seasons. The Okotoks Oilers, the AJHL, we've talked about them quite a bit with some of these recruits coming in. So
they have.
It's been pretty impressive. Led the Oilers in all 3 scoring categories. That would be goals, assists, and points from the math that I can tell. 85 points in 60 games, as well as 11 points in 14 playoff contests for him last season. Rookie of the Year for the league, Canadian Junior Hockey League top Rookie of the Year, all rookie and all-star team, and also had 4 assists in 4 games at the under-18 World Championships for Team Canada for the 2022 tournament. So, Nick, this is someone that we've had our eye on for a little bit now. We talked about him a little bit when we were talking about the Wild draft picks. If you're a Denver fan, what are you looking forward to here?
He's a game breaker. He really is. He does have that talent level. You don't get picked in the second round by a mistake, unless you're Minnesota Wild. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. I should say past regimes, maybe.
Drafting playoff success if we could ever actually get to a second round. But.
Right. But no, he has all the tools to be quite the offensive force. And again, I think he will be, like we discussed with Magnus Corona and other, he's going to be the recipient of a good system that's going to allow him to, shall we say, maximize his talents. Again, when you look at this roster as a whole and you see the different skill sets, you see the different mix and the balance up and down this lineup. Granted, he's a freshman, so there's a learning curve to it as well. But again, the Ox Oilers and more importantly, the Alberta Junior Hockey League, I think as we discussed this previously, the 4th most in terms of college recruitments, in terms of which I should say organization or league they're coming from. Yeah. So a big part of that, in fact, the St. Cloud State Huskies are getting one themselves, and Ethan Aucoin from a different team, but still the same league. So the Canadian players, and I think maybe we haven't talked about this enough, Noah, too. It's one thing to get the high level talent no matter what, but to get them out of Canada, where the number one goal is to try to make the CHL, you're starting to attract a lot of good talent that maybe by terms of maybe by their book, maybe late bloomers, maybe there's some tools there. Yeah. It's good that the NCAA game is attracting these players too, because let's face it, 4th most out of any league coming to the NCAA. These are some exciting players to watch, and they're NHL draft picks. So that the quality of the depth of talent, not just for Denver, for across the NCAA, is getting better.
Yeah, and the CHL obviously has some support for this too, but I think the opportunity, and not every player is like this, but there are a fair number of opportunities for these guys, to get a good education with some potential scholarship things too. To be able to get an education and play hockey, I think is a big get for a lot of these guys, especially like you mentioned. When you look at Rieger, he's a 2004, right? He's a young kid, true freshman, like you had mentioned. So taking a look at that piece too, thinking about career wise of some things, maybe just don't pan out in the hockey world. That happens. But I think the Minnesota Wild and the Denver Pioneers are certainly getting a good get from the AJ, as are a lot of other teams, as we've seen from the recruiting classes in the previous previews. So if you're bored, go check those out. I would. Also, if you're hanging out in Denver or any other area, I've actually been to Magnus Arena. Got to see Troy Terry talk against Arizona State actually after he scored the game-winning shootout goal for the World Junior Championships a couple of years ago. First half schedule, they start an exhibition contest October 1st against the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. They're at home against Notre Dame and Maine the following weekend. Then they travel the 14th and 15th of October to UMass for a non-conference matchup. Then they're back home against Providence. And then they actually start their NCHC schedule 1 week earlier than most other teams. They do play at the end of October. Their first NCHC contest is against the Miami Redhawks before coming back home to play the St. Cloud State Huskies. The Huskies have him very early this season, which is actually not par for the course. Usually they have him a little bit later in like late January, early February. So November 11th and 12th, they're headed up to Grand Forks in North Dakota. 25th and 26th at home against Omaha. Weekend of my birthday, December 2nd and 3rd, Arizona State comes to town to visit the Pios. The 9th and 10th of December, Duluth will be the location for their next contest. And then actually, before the second half gets rolling, they do have a matchup at home the 16th and 17th of December, right before the holidays, against Lindenwood, who is making their jump here to the Division I realm. So first half schedule, all right, I would think. Yeah. You think?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. January 6th and 7th, they actually get kind of 1 week off now for that time. They don't play at the tail end of December like a lot of other teams do. They get Alaska Fairbanks at home to start out the second half before getting right back to conference action the rest of the way. Miami will visit them at home, followed by a trip to St. Cloud January 20th and 21st. That's more akin to what we've kind of seen. Usually that trip in early January was the trip where the Huskies went to Denver, though. So a little bit of a flip-flop there. January 27th, which is a Friday, they will be at home against Colorado College before traveling the following Saturday, February 4th, to Colorado College. So you do have that one game matchup for a couple weeks instead of that bye week that we had kind of talked about with Colorado College. That I like that matchup.
Gold man, yes.
Yeah, sweet matchup, I think. February 10th and 11th at home against North Dakota. Good to see those teams match up 4 times. Should be one heck of a contest in all 4 of those ones. February 17th and 18th, they're at home against Duluth, traveling to Western Michigan to finish out the month, and then at home, and then finishing on the road that same weekend, March 3rd and 4th against Colorado College once again. So this team, Nick, before we get to the fan questions, we've kept them in suspense for over an hour here, Nick. And obviously we're going to highlight this a little bit more when we have North Dakota at number 1. But I think a lot of people, are kind of curious as to, with both these teams so close, we do have Denver at number 2. Their recruiting class obviously is exceptional, just like North Dakota's is. Goaltending is a bit of a question mark, just like North Dakota is. These two teams have very identical structures here, Nick. I think from my perspective, and you and I kind of talked about this, where you and I had differing opinions on this too. I think if you look at this Denver team, and I certainly have high expectations for them, they could really pick up the mail and carry it once again and have another great season like they did last year. I just think the top end scoring that this team lost that made them so successful, your Bobby Brinks, your Carter Savoys, I just think it's too difficult to replace and look at them and say, yep, they're a bona fide number 1 team in the NCHC this year. Is that a bit harsh? I don't know. But Nick, they, even Brett Stapley, these guys, Cole Gutman, guys who were in the top 5 in scoring on the forward end, they're going to be surely missed. And they were good 200-foot players on top of their offensive prowess.
Right in all fronts, and despite, a great coach that David Carl is, this is the challenge of NCAA hockey. That every single year you're losing great players to whether it's just to graduation or to professional signings. Again, that's the challenge is no matter what you do, you rarely have, if any, the same lineup every year after year. And let's go back to our own Brett Larson. And I'm pretty sure David Carl has already had this mentality as last year's book is done. It's closed, right? And that is this year is a brand new storybook that has to be written, and you have the pen in your hand, which means either you can, like you mentioned, you can put in the work, you can act like maybe you're the underdog, which I think really Denver, if there's anything that I got from them last year, is that I kind of feel like they were out to prove something because they really weren't happy with themselves the year prior. They felt like they expected more. I got that vibe from them. I'm sure others did too, because they went out and they proved their point. That's for sure. But yeah, to finish off, to that is, I really do think that it is a challenge to replace that offense. And granted, there's a lot of, you could say, raw skill. There's a lot of young talent that's there that's going to come in. But again, how does each transition from juniors to the NCAA level? How do they fit to Denver's system? Again, do they how well do they assimilate with their teammates and the line chemistry or the defensive pairing, right? All these things matter to a successful hockey program. And when you lose a lot of those upperclassmen who were your big point producers, that's the toughest part to replace. And Denver's going to have to try to figure that out quick if they're going to have to try to replicate the last season's success.
And when you make a national championship game, not to say that you have a next season slump or anything like that, but it's, it's hard. It's hard to get back into that rhythm and, go through that grind again for the players that are returning, quite obviously. And on top of that, you just, and I don't say this in a biased way at all, because I don't like North Dakota, let's be honest with you. But you look at North Dakota, and we've talked about how they reload on the fly. They don't rebuild, they reload. They really have this year. And the other thing, whether this makes a difference or not, it's been a few years since North Dakota has had a real extended amount of success at the NCAAs, and I feel like they're getting restless up there. And Bradbury, I feel like has a ticking time bomb that's ready with this freshman crew that's coming up. But like I said, I look at Denver and North Dakota, and it's the same thing with Duluth and St. Cloud. I see a separation of a point, maybe 2, maybe they even tie for the Penrose again this season. It's that close. So to say they're number 2 is I don't want to say demeaning, but almost not befitting of how good this team essentially could be again this season. So A couple of fan questions here, Nick, to close out before we get to our final wrap-ups for the Denver Pioneers. Number one, I love this. This is so good. I just retweeted this because it was just that good. Caleb Peabody
Oh boy.
says, why don't you wear your glasses when you come on the podcast? You need them. We all know it. And if you can't see your notes correctly, you may think we're talking about Colorado College.
Who says I'm reading notes?
Yeah, well, I didn't even know you could read to begin with. So
Neither did I. So
yeah.
point buried.
He also wants to know, since you didn't listen to the prediction last year in regards to how good Denver would be, and to Caleb's credit, he did say that Denver was going to be a wagon, and we weren't disagreeing, but we
were skeptical.
He owned it, and it sure paid off for him. He wants to know, will you be taking him to Denver this year on a yacht? What's the story here?
How do you get to Colorado via water? There's no water left.
That's what you think.
That's apparently. I guess I need my glass. I guess I'm not seeing with my lack of glasses where the straight, river, fjord, whatever you want to call it, is going to take me there. So if you can show me the map, let's figure it out.
Yeah, haven't you ever seen like a Coors and you got the Rockies, man? It just flows down the Rockies, and anyway. Derek Felska wants
some boat.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, they were the Pios were definitely a boat and a half or a wagon last season. Derek Felska wants to know, Denver racked up the rare double-peat, which is true with men's college hockey and the Colorado Avalanche in the NHL last season.
Actually, a triple-peat technically with the high school. Yes.
Yeah. What are your odds that they can do it again? And will those odds be Caleb J. Peabody approved? And Caleb also asked his last question, will Denver run it back this year? I think they have a great chance.
They do have a good chance. And again, depends on how quickly those young guns can get into David Carl's system, feeling comfortable in Division I hockey. Again, that's the biggest question with a larger freshman class. And again, replacing a lot of that, reliable talent, I think is the best way to describe it, right? It's that the seniors, yes, they did the points, but you could rely on them. You knew it because you could put them in situations such as those defensive zone faceoffs to win something that's key. There's a lot of those little things in hockey that those upperclassmen do that don't make the score sheet or maybe get appreciated enough. We talked about that a little bit earlier with freshmen. That's stuff that they have to develop and learn, and that's really the big X factor to what Denver could do as far as repeating or be maybe a middle of the road team. We just don't know, but again, a lot of it's going to bend on how well this freshman class does assimilate to what David Carl wants them to play like.
Yeah, this team is going to be a good team. I predict they're at minimum, I would think, going to be a top 10 team in the country. I'm hesitant to put them in the top 5 because it's easy to say, oh yeah, they'll be a top 5 team. It's so hard to get to that point. You have to be so good. And think about this. Think about how good Denver was, one of the best goal differentials in all of college hockey at plus 82 last season. They were number 4 in the pairwise, so think about how hard it is to get to that point. Caleb also wants to know if you're going to buy him and Alex Micheletti raising canes. If anyone hasn't gotten a chance to see that GIF, I think he should. The only other question
shared, I'm assuming soon. So
yeah, no kidding. The only other question asker was Johnny Mack at Fight the Pants. Always love his questions coming in. He's got 3 of them for us. Number one, any surprises on this roster for you this season? Anything that kind of stuck out to you as maybe guys that departed, maybe guys that are coming in, freshmen, anything like that?
Not really. I think Bobby Brink was always a question mark after the season. Savoy, to me, was certainly due to have his way out just because he has that talent. I hate to say it. And again, whenever you win a national championship, there's decisions to make, especially with those guys that were NHL picks. Let's just say the agents and, general manager staff, they come knocking and they come have conversations with you. Especially when you reach that, that ultimate goal. So I'm not really surprised. I think the biggest surprise maybe is Tristan Brose as the transfer and sort of the way that whole situation's unfolded. But beyond that, not really anything surprising.
I really liked how the defensive core has stayed intact. I think, I don't know if it's a surprise, but we talked about Kyle Mayhew a little bit, and how he had 11 points last season. Obviously wasn't a huge, offensive producer in terms of season. He's a guy that you look at that though as a graduate student. I think that getting him, I almost said re-signing, but you know what I mean, getting him back for a 5th season, I think that is actually going to be one of the most underrated moves that comes from this Pioneers club. Out of all the great things we've talked about, having a solid defenseman like that he's a gamer, he can play, you can plug him in any situation. He's going to be a good veteran leader. He's going to play a lot, I believe, this year. I think there's a lot to like. A great mentor for those 2 young freshmen that are coming in. I look at a guy like that, and how do you not like him? You know what I mean? He almost reminds me of like not really even a poor man's, but let's just go with it. A poor man's Jake Middleton, so to speak, just hard, heavy minutes, good 200-foot player, plays what we would call man-u net presence, which means he keeps the player between himself and the net. Pretty simple to follow that one there. So, I think he does a lot of things right that I think go underrated, and he's the only player to return for that graduate season. And I think it's a great pickup for this Pios club. So not really a surprise on this roster, but more like a, that could work out really well for this team. So excited to take a look at that, I think. On the other side of this, the only other two questions that he had for us, the next one is, what's the secret to how they were able to dominate long stretches of play against good teams last year? Like we mentioned, shot differential plus 500 plus, essentially. This was a team, not only were they good, they were a dominant team. How do you think they did it?
Well, let's look at their second period, which was their most dominant one. And granted, that's the period of the long change, right, Noah Grant? And I think for them, it more highlighted just how good they were on the forecheck and how good they were with puck possession. That's how I interpreted it as. Granted, let's put it to you this way. I think Denver, they were smart with the puck. It's one thing to say, oh, I can forecheck and I can run that system, the 1-2-2, the 2-1-2, and I can execute it really well. But it's another thing to kind of be on the forecheck, then get possession of the puck, so create a turnover if there was one, or be on the rush, and to make the smart or the right play, right? And a big thing about Denver was they were patient with the puck in the offensive zone, and they didn't waste time per se. So it's kind of opposite, where like some teams possess it because they're looking for that one perfect play. They're trying to get something particular, whereas Denver was, we have options, but the thing is, at the end of this, if I've got the puck in the offensive zone, I need to make something of it. And so they ran their offense. So I think efficient is the right word, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. The other thing that I think really made them successful is just the variety of ways in which they were able to capitalize. They came at you with so many different weapons. They were a quick strike team on the rush. They were a team that could offer some sustained zone time and be able to tally pucks in the back of that too. They were able to chip and chase and keep pucks in front of them. We talked about that game against Mankato, where Mankato was the better team for 40-45 minutes in that national championship game. Well, Denver held them to that 1-0 lead and, just kept the play in front of them and realized you got to score at least one to win a hockey game. So we're still in a good spot, and I think having the trust in that coaching staff too, a little bit more of a veteran coaching staff as well too, like you had mentioned, I think just all play dividends for this team. So really, I don't even know if it's a secret, but it's a lot of pieces coming together and very well laid into this very nice puzzle that obviously won a national championship last season. Final question from Johnny Mack, and I love how he phrases this. He goes, does the University of Denver University still have a team that can be relentless in attack, or do they need to adjust the roster a bit, or maybe just adjust the style of play? When you look at the new roster, do you see shades of the team last year, or do you think this team is going to have a different look?
I do, but you kind of wonder early on, especially with the freshmen, do they have more of an emphasis on defense, especially neutral zone and their own zone, and maybe more focusing on transition? Again, David Carl, his brand of hockey is smart hockey. That's really what it comes down to, is making smart decisions with the puck. So as these freshmen are coming in, and granted, checking their learning curves, especially early on, I don't think you're going to see as much of an aggressive forecheck as we've seen in the past, but more so, you're going to probably see some low to high plays. You'll see, shots from the point, but more so, and maybe more rush attempts, I would say, would be what I would see. And later on, as these freshmen in this group gels, you're going to see that system get more into that suffocating, really possessive behind the red line type that we've seen from them in years past. But that's going to take time for that team to develop.
I certainly agree. Final two questions. As always, Nick, if you're the Denver Pioneers, how the heck do you repeat for a national championship and do what you did last season in the upcoming year? And if you're St. Cloud State, you got them 4 times and you got them very early in the NCHC schedule. How do you figure this team out and get a couple of W's?
For Denver, you have to trust the process. You have to trust in the coaching staff and the players around you that just went through that journey and had success with it, obviously. So I think, again, you got to learn every day, especially the younger between sophomore and freshman. What's that? 15 of their 26 players, if I did my math correctly. So
which is questionable, but we'll ignore that.
It's always questionable. So I just throw out numbers. Why not? Why not? So
hey, you could be like me someday.
I'm working on it, actually.
You don't want to do that. Run, take the bus and run, drive it away.
But again, trust the process. Again, that coaching staff is so good. They're so good at the details of the game. And I really think if you're able to go in and learn every day, you're going to be fine. For Denver, for St. Cloud early on, kind of force them to play defense a little bit. I think if you're early on, if you can get possession against them and kind of make, especially the younger players, run around a little bit, maybe get uncomfortable and just force them to defend, you'll wear them down. I think there's an opportunity there, especially early on. Obviously, this team is going to get better in the second half. And when you get them there, you're going to have to really, dare I say, match speed with speed, and more so get interior around the defenseman. There's, again, net. Like I said, you have to kind of get yourself into the house. You got to get them in front of Magnus Corona, take away his vision, get shots through, and get shots through in a variety of different ways. And more so, stay out of the box. This team, you mentioned it was how many power play? They were over almost 24%. You can't give them free opportunities at the net. They've got some raw talent coming in that should be good. I mean, was it Carter Savoy had 8 power play goal assists in the pot alone? If I recall correctly, he was a stud. They've got some guys that could replicate that. So be disciplined against them too, because in seasons past, they've made you pay for it.
If you're saying Cloud, I think you have to look and get out of the mentality game a little bit. I think so many times when they play Denver, especially at Magnus Arena, where they have not won in that building since 2015, the next closest building for them, I believe, is Kalamazoo in 2019 or 2020. But that's a long time. I mean, this is year 8, Nick, since they've won in that building. So you have to get out of the mentality game, and they're traveling there early. St. Cloud, for whatever reason, when they play Denver, just seems sometimes to just not have that right frame of mind to hang on to games, or, they've blown a couple of leads when they've been in Denver, especially too. I think you have to throw all that away and just kind of mark it as a clean slate. You had your national championship appearance 2 years ago. Denver won a natty last season. Wipe the slate clean and just go in with a fresh focus and a fresh mindset. And I think you just, be able to handle the things between the ears before you take care of the on-ice product. And I know that maybe doesn't sound that helpful, but I think, it's easy to look, same when we talk about the Wild jokingly, they can't get past the first round. It's easy to let those demons, those, anthills turn into mountains or whatever you want to call it, because, the mentality part of things and believing you can beat an opponent, just ask AIC if you're a Huskies fan, can definitely pay dividends. On the Denver side of things, number one, as you had mentioned, keep the train rolling. But I think when it goes back to this too, just get the forward group up to speed, because the defensive core, I think, is going to be good. Goaltending, you have a known commodity. You know what you're getting on the back end there too. I think just getting the forward group up to speed, you have 5 freshman forwards here, just kind of getting them acclimated like we talked about, but just trying to replicate some of that scoring touch. And it doesn't have to be where 1 or 2 guys pop out like, Bobby Brink, Carter Savoy, those guys like that. Just understanding that it might be a little bit more winning by committee, but the entire group as a whole might be more productive and continue to grow and tally a couple more points than the guys did in years past. So I think if that offense continues to grow, and which is scary to think about that offense growing after a plus 82 goal differential last season, I think they're going to be just fine. So as always, we wish the Denver Pioneers the best of luck in every NCHC endeavor, except of course, against our St. Cloud State Huskies. We're going to head on to a very short and sweet extra ice session where we take a look at the next round of action that happened at the Women's World Championships. And welcome into the Extra Ice Session, episode number 107. I just crushed Nick Maxon's hopes and dreams in between the last segment and this segment, so it's fine, Nick. We're all doing our thing, right? Just kidding. Nick's doing just fine.
I'm not even sure what I'm doing, honestly. So what thing am I crushing?
Well, who is crushing it? How about Team USA at the Women's Worlds?
Yes.
It's been very impressive for them. I also didn't mention I'm Noah Grant in the Extra Ice Session. Not that anybody cared about that. But what we do care about as far as names, as current and former St. Cloud State women's players that have been in this tournament. Let's start there as we did last week. A couple more games to evaluate here. Laura Kluge, who is done now. Germany has been eliminated. 4 games played for him. 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points for him. Was -1. Actually a pretty good tournament for how poor for how poor Germany actually ended up being. They ended up only winning one game, and their goal differential was -8. So just kind of not a great team in the Group B this year, unfortunately. Laura Zimmerman, the Swiss forward coming in as a freshman for the Huskies this season, had 2 points in 4 contests, was -1 for the Swiss, who are getting ready for their relegation round. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but a pretty good little tournament to start for her. Yanina Newland, 5 games played for him. The Finns are in kind of the same boat. They're trying to continue their success. I apologize. The Swiss are actually in the medal round. Is the Finns who are in the relegation round is what I meant to say. Yanina Newland, unfortunately, no points for her, and -5 still in that rating. The Finns have kind of had a topsy-turvy tournament on their end of things. And then finally, for Klara Hemlerova from Czechia, 5 games played, a +4 rating, 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points, tied for 27th in tournament scoring as a whole, has a 21% shooting percentage for her. So pretty good tournament, but what we've expected on the international stage, and in a Husky sweater for Klara Hemlerova, as she is in her upperclassman years now for the Huskies. Feels weird to say that, doesn't it? We remember when she was part of that really great freshman group coming in. In fact, maybe let's talk about that. Of course, Laura Zimmerman is a new commodity, but we know what Laura Kluge has brought. Had that shoulder injury halfway through her junior year, but other than that, has stayed relatively healthy. Klara Hemlerova, great producer as always, and Yanina Newland has been a driver, leading the team in scoring for a couple of seasons with this St. Cloud roster. So, what are these players that, especially the ones that we've known before, what do they bring to the table for the international teams, for those who don't know?
They bring experience. They bring a wealth. I think just overall, and this is, let's say it this way: the Huskies women's have been looking for, shall we say, more bright spots, and for these women, they're kind of the stabilizers. Really, they kind of happen throughout their careers, and going to Laura Zimmerman coming in, right, from the Swiss, to have that experience before she even touches the ice. And again, it's a whole different regime coming in with Brian Nadolski being the new head coach. And again, Janelle Sergey still behind the bench, Molly Engstrom, as we mentioned last week, off as head coach of Maine. You're looking for some of these players that have the experience to sort of kind of drive the bus a little bit. That's kind of what this is all about, is using these big sort of international experiences to take that and to have that be a ripple effect in your teammates. I do feel like that the women's Huskies, we've talked about this the last couple of years now, we're just waiting for the dominoes to fall. And you kind of wonder with a fresh voice, with some new blood coming in, and especially with some good experience and with this, with Laura Zimmerman, is this the year that it finally turns around? Last season was, I think, even more tough to take because they were better in situations that just couldn't quite put it together. And you need some of these players with this experience, to be able to make that turnaround. And so it's good. It can only help you in your squad to try to, get over the hump per se. And I think, the ones that have been there, like we mentioned, the Hemlerovas and Kluge, again, not a part of the Huskies organization now, but had been, right. They're going to be looked back as part of the building blocks to get this Huskies program back to where it needs to be.
And what a great chance, especially for someone like Laura Zimmerman, like you mentioned, to play this tournament right before the start of training camp when the season gets underway, being conditioned for that as well, too. Group A, of course, the Swiss are in there along with Japan, the Finns, Canada, and the U.S. U.S. has the best goal differential in the tournament, outscoring opponents 30-3 for a +27 differential in the prelim round. Pretty impressive. The U.S. did beat Japan 10-1, the Finns by a score of 6-1. Swiss by a score of 9-2. So that -1 for Laura Zimmerman looks all the more impressive, I think, with that score on the board. Then the U.S. Rallying and taking care of Canada pretty handily, 5-2 in that last game in the prelims. And then they beat Hungary today by a score of 12-1 in the quarterfinal medal round. So
12-1, Gordon.
Yeah, seriously. Speaking of a team that's been doing very well, the Czechs, by the way, 21-2 is their goal differential. They've actually had a pretty decent little scoring pace for them. Swedes sitting in second for Group B, the Hungarians, Germans, and then the host team Denmark finished last in that group as well, too. So Saturday, September 3rd, that is where the semifinal games and consolation qualifiers will be going on. And then Sunday is the 5th place game, the bronze medal game, and the gold medal game. So what do I mean by those things? Well, on September 3rd, the United States and the Czechs are going to get ready for their matchup, and then Canada will get the Swiss. and the winner of those 2 games head on to the gold medal game. The losers, of course, face each other in the bronze. That's the medal round side of things. On the other side, Finland gets Hungary and Japan faces Sweden. The losers are done. The winners of those 2 essentially are going to get each other for what should be the last potential spot in Group A for next tournament that comes around. I believe the Czechs enter the next tourney in P4 of Group A, unless the winner of the above game for P5 is either Finland or Japan, who are already in Group A. Final rankings are what group you're in, so A versus B coming into the tournament, higher position in that group, number of points, goal differential, goals scored, and better seeding. So I think that's how it works. That's my best stab at it. I'm not going to sit on there too much, but just so you know that there is kind of a consolation round that is important for these teams that have been knocked out of the medal round. So they are ranked from 1 to 10 all the way through this tournament, and it does influence where they're going to sit for next tournament, as well as I believe the 10th team, the bottom team, actually gets kicked out, and then a new team comes into number 10 each World Championship.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of things going on there too. So Nick, with this U.S. team, they've got a legitimate chance to go a long way here in their potential last 2 games here. I shouldn't say potential; they are going to get 2 games, but the question is, what medal will they be vying for? You look at this team that has had that production. You look at all the the superstars, your Hillary Knights, who of course are breaking records that bring that wealth of veteran experience, even at only age 33. What has this U.S. team done, compared to Canada, whose goal differential is 19 goals for, 7 goals against? They're having a good tournament, but they're not exactly eye-popping numbers from what we've seen from a lot of Canadian teams, especially in years past. And this Canadian team, of course, is a little more defensively structured on the women's side that we've seen in years past.
Mm-hmm.
What has this U.S. team done well, and what do they have to continue to do if they want a gold medal at the end of this?
Dare I say it scares me that it's been this easy for them?
Yeah, I agree.
Actually, so
it goes back to what we talked about with the men too, and their prelims.
Correct. And so dare I say that this is exactly where maybe looking ahead, and there shouldn't be, right? Because there's still an important game for the U.S. up on Saturday against Czechia that they have to get through first. And that is when you get success, and I shouldn't say easy, but the scores make it. I mean, honestly,
the U.S. thought Czechia was going to be easy in their medal round on the men's side. How'd that turn out?
Exactly. So it's the prelim rounds are great because it puts you in a position to have that better shot of getting to the ultimate prize, which is a gold medal and a gold medal matchup, right? But on the flip side is when things start to get not as easy, and things had been easy for you, mind you, quote unquote, right? How do you handle that? Canada, as you mentioned, not the most eye-popping goal differential, but they're still a good team. And dare I say that the history shows that whoever wins the prelims flip-flops for the medal, especially in the women's side. So this is not a given thing with any tournament like this, right? So I think I'm a little actually more concerned for the U.S. Than the numbers should suggest, because again, as we get to the good teams, we get to the medal round, that's when things start tightening up. And again, what scares me is, especially in the game of hockey, is if you're a team like the USA and you've been offensive, you've only given up 3 goals all tournament long so far in the prelims. If you go down, say 1 or 2-0 early, what does that do to your mentality's sake? And does that mean you start changing the way you play, whether it's coached like that or not? And then all of a sudden you find yourself behind the 8 ball and can't catch up. And so this is a huge test for them on Saturday. Again, the numbers don't tell the entire story. And to me, Canada has always been the kryptonite in the gold medal game against the United States. And so to me, this is not as easy as it looks, and more so Canada being more defensively structured. That's kind of exactly where Canada wants them right now, is to kind of suffocate the offensive explosions as the United States. Now, granted, it's easy to play defense. We're in the offensive zone, but has the USA really been tested and had to, fight out of a long, time in their own zone? I don't really think so as of yet. So, this ain't over yet. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. There's a lot still yet to be proven here for Team USA.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The 30 goals makes sense. I'm kind of confused, though. I wonder if I marked one of these down. They allowed 1 goal against Japan, 1 against Finland, 2 against the Swiss, and 2 against Canada. Yet it says they've only allowed 3 goals. By my calculations, that's 5. Yeah, that would be 6 there, Nick.
1, 1, 2, 2. Yeah, that's 6. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Look at that.
Okay.
People listen to us weekly. Can you believe that?
Must
Anyway,
be their comic relief. I don't know.
well, let's talk about things that are weekly, because when next week's show comes out, we're going to have the answer to all of this. I want to get your thoughts here, Nick. Finland and Hungary, Japan and Sweden all have a chance to win that consolation round. Out of the 4 teams, is there a team that you like?
Sweden.
Yeah.
For no reason at all, honestly.
Goal differentials +2 for them. They have 1 win, 2 overtime wins, and a loss coming into the medal round. On the other side, the Finns, 2 wins, 2 losses, goal differential +2, very even teams. I think you look at those 2 teams, Japan, unfortunately, I mean, their goal differential, according to the website, 31-4, they've been outscored, unfortunately.
Eek.
And then Hungary, actually, goal differential is -5, but they just don't score a lot. So I think it's going to come down to those 2 teams. And, well, if you're going to go Sweden, I'm going to go Finland. Why not? Sure. Of course, I am Swedish and Finnish, so I'm a little bit torn. What can I say? I'm also Danish, too, and German. I don't,
At least the flag for a lot of that's consistent. Just the colors are different.
Yeah, no kidding. Austrian and Polish, if anyone else is wondering the other end of that, too. But beyond that,
that explains some things.
U.S. and I don't know what it explains. U.S. and Czechs, they're going to play each other, and Canada and the Swiss are going to play each other. Who makes the medal round game? Who makes the bronze medal game? Who comes out of that?
I still think it's U.S. and Canada in the gold medal game. It's would you say Czechia and remind me again?
The Swiss.
The Swiss. I think Czechia takes 3rd, and I'm going to go against the grain. I do think Canada wins gold and USA is stunned in the gold medal game, because I think Canada again just has been, they somehow read the book. And I think again, USA has had too easy of a schedule, too easy of a time. And I think Canada is going to be one that takes it.
Yeah, I agree with your 3rd place game with the Czechs. I'm going to go the U.S. beats Canada 4-3 in overtime for a gold medal. So
it's close.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to go with there. But speaking of things that are gold or lack thereof, the Huskies Warming House podcast does continue next week. How exciting is that? We should have a normal Sunday release unless anything comes up. But of course, we'll let you know. You can find us at Warming House Den. That will be our preview for who we believe is going to be the number 1 team in the NCHC coming up here next week. That is the North Dakota Effin' Hawks, as we would like to call them. And then after that week, we have our final NCHC preview, and that is the St. Cloud State Huskies. And we have some wrap-up things, some really cool things to talk about as far as the video board in the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, among other things. We're kind of tabling that until the St. Cloud stuff for a couple weeks. So we promise we didn't forget. If you made it to the show this far, a lot of people probably didn't, and they probably shut us off, and then they're going to rant at us on Twitter, and that's fine. We love to see all your fan engagement. Again, at Warming House 10, that's where you can find us. And you can find Nick Maxon at the Puck Scribe on the same platform, and myself at SCSU Hockey 91. For Nick Maxon and myself, Noah Grant, we thank you for listening to the Huskies Warming House podcast, and we will see you soon in the den.
Here, one-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.